know I mostly teach two types of essay styles, the argumentative and the reflective, but these aren't the only styles out there. And I don't want to necessarily convey the message that you have to do one thing to get a good mark in the GAMSAT, because that's just not true. I've heard of stories of people writing all sorts of different essays and scored highly in the GAMSAT in Section 2. So I thought that we could explore a few of the styles today that maybe you might want to explore further yourself, so that you guys know that there are other types of essays out there, and if you do them well, then you'll also be able to score well. So as much as I love the argumentative and reflective, let's check out some other essay styles that are out there. Hi guys, and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name's Kate Robson and I scored 80 in Section 2 of the GAMSAT in March last year. And since then, I've just kind of been making videos trying to help you guys be able to do the same thing as well. So if you like this content, feel free to chuck us a like and subscribe if you're not already, because it really helps this channel grow and for me to get the word out there. Before we start, I do want to do a quick plug. If you want to know more about the styles that I write and how to also write them and the step-by-step guide through them so that you can learn everything that you need to do to write a good argumentative and reflective, then you might want to consider enrolling for my Section 2 course, which is just a real step-by-step guide giving you all of the information that I learned along the way, or all the useful information constructed into one course that you can work through and learn very quickly to help you score highly in Section 2 as well. So if you're interested, I'll put the link in the video description and feel free to enroll now. Today we're going to be talking about 5 different styles. Well, mostly 4, but I'll chuck on the 5th one at the end because I think it's also important to acknowledge as a style, and you probably could write a GAMSAT essay about it, although it might be a little bit more difficult, and I'll get to why that is soon. But yes, we've got 5 essay styles for you today, and you might like 1 or 2 of these and you can take them and make them yourself and figure out how they work. But I'll give you a brief overview as to the 5 different types of essays that are out there in case you might be wanting to try some different ones. The first one is the argumentative. This is the one that I write for my Task A essays. I've seen it many a times before. It's kind of like the standard one for Task A. Essentially, the purpose of an argumentative essay is to form an evidence-based opinion and to deliver that in an essay. It requires a strong thesis point, which is essentially a stance on a topic, the overall central argument of an essay. And the aim of the overall essay is to convince the reader of that thesis, using evidence and analysis to back yourself up. So the general structure of an argumentative essay, and the one that I mostly use as well, is that you've got an introduction, body paragraphs, and a conclusion. The introduction provides some background to the topic and introduces the thesis statement. The body paragraphs present your evidence and your arguments and kind of take the form of a topic sentence, evidence, some analysis, a counter-argument, and a linking sentence. And the conclusion summarizes the argument and emphasizes its importance. In terms of an example of an argumentative paragraph, I'll put one here that you can read over at your own will if you're kind of looking to understand a little bit more what an argumentative style essay or paragraph is. So have a read through that if you'd like. You can pause the video here. But essentially, yeah, it's kind of structured in that topic sentence, example or evidence, explain, link, counter-argument, linking sentence sort of structure. And this is pretty much the one that I use in my argumentative essays. The second type of style is the expository style. This one is kind of talked about less because I suppose it's used less commonly in GAMSAT essays. An expository essay provides a clear and focused explanation of a topic, and it communicates information or knowledge about that topic. The purpose of it is to test your familiarity or your knowledge of a topic, and it's kind of the one that's commonly used in exam style questions, you know, asking how much you know about this topic and how well you're able to explain it. The reason it's probably used less commonly in GAMSAT essays is because it's more of a description rather than an analysis or an argumentative, and an argumentative kind of shows that you're taking an opinion on something, which is a little bit stronger rather than describing something in a GAMSAT essay. Although you can probably write an expository essay that's strong if your knowledge about a topic is really solid. The general structure of an expository essay is similar to the argumentative in that it's composed of the introduction, body, and conclusion paragraphs, but within that they're slightly different. So the introduction kind of states the topic and the background of the topic. The body paragraphs present the details using topic sentences, explanations, and concluding sentences, and the conclusion summarizes the info that you've provided throughout the essay. Once again, I'll put an example of it here. All this information is, by the way, from one single website that I found really helpful. I'll link that in the video description below if you'd like to read more about it. But essentially this paragraph is an expository style paragraph. And as you can see, it's kind of more describing a topic, showing an understanding of a topic and explaining that to someone else. The third type of essay is the narrative essay, and our reflective and creative essays fall under this umbrella. The narrative style can be personal or imaginative stories, but it's essentially storytelling or presenting a compelling narrative using creative language techniques. This sort of essay tests your ability to build up a narrative that's engaging and well structured, and it's used kind of in the more personal statement sort of situation, either telling a story about yourself or someone else or that's imagined, and kind of implying the lessons that you learned from that. The structure can be very broad and different depending on the piece, but essentially the overall structure is that you set up the narrative and then imply the lessons that you gained from that. I teach this one extensively in my course as well. I teach the version of it that I've kind of adapted to suit GAMSAT essays and how to score highly in that. To understand that further, I'll pop a paragraph of it here so that you guys can kind of see what that sort of involves. Although you can really go any sorts of ways with the narrative style essay, so don't feel like you have to do this necessarily, but it's really just describing anything in your life that kind of contributed to your growth as a person, or your imagined growth or someone else's growth. The next one is the descriptive style essay, which we definitely hear about less. And I think this one actually holds a lot of potential for the GAMSAT, so it's kind of a shame that it's not as widely discussed in the GAMSAT world. Although perhaps it's because it's very specific and it might be difficult in terms of the nature of the task and responding to prompts. Descriptive essays are essentially detailed sensory descriptions of objects, places, or things. It uses creative language like narratives do, but it's more tightly focused. They describe a place or an object instead of telling the whole story. So that could be this room, that water bottle, this plant, my shirt. Something that kind of has a connection to you that you can create a story out of. They test your ability to use language creatively and your word choices, your striking specific word choices to really convey a message and describe that sort of object or place. And again, it's kind of loosely structured. You introduce the object and then finish by painting a broader picture of it. I haven't explored these much myself, but I think they actually could be a lot of fun too if you are leaning less towards the reflective style. Maybe there's, a couch or a bed or something that you have a particular connection to, or a dog, and you want to tell the story of that. Once again, I'll put an example of it here so that you can read through it, pause the video if you want to check it out. But essentially it's kind of describing one place and telling the story of that place. Again, I think this could have potential to do well if you do it well, because it will really test your ability as a writer. And hopefully it will be a nice experience for the marker to read. And the final one that I wanted to include, although is probably less likely to come up in GAMSAT essays, is textual analysis. Essentially, a textual analysis is closely analyzing a text to explain how it achieves certain effects. And within this, there are kind of two types of textual analysis. The first one is rhetorical analysis. And this sort of essay looks at a persuasive text. So something like a speech, an essay, or a political cartoon, like some of the ones that you might find in section 1. And it looks at the rhetorical devices that it uses and evaluates their effectiveness. Instead of looking at what the author is saying, they kind of look at how they're structuring and conveying their argument. And the general structure of it includes an introduction, body paragraphs, and a conclusion. Although the body paragraphs are pretty much solely analysis, and your conclusion is summarizing that analysis and emphasizing the relevance of the text to broader concerns. Once again, I'll put an example of it here that's on the website that I've linked in the video description. You could potentially employ it in a GAMSAT essay, but such a specific analysis would have to be warranted. Likewise with the next type of textual analysis, which is a literary analysis. And this is essentially an in-depth interpretation of a text. It presents a close reading of a piece of literature, like a poem or a novel, to explore how the author conveyed the messages in the story within that piece of work and the kind of effect that that might have on the reader. It discusses the setting, the characters, the theme, the language used, all that kind of stuff that we were supposed to do in English throughout high school that I never really fell in love with. But the overall purpose is to closely analyze what the author is trying to convey and how they do it. Once again, the general structure is an introduction, body paragraphs, and conclusion, but the intro is mostly just introducing the text and the context of the text, and the body paragraphs are mostly just an analysis of like specific quotes and pieces of the work. Then the conclusion is mostly just discussing what your approach tells us about the text and how it provides an insight. And once again, I'll put an example on the screen now that you can have a read through. But yeah, this might not come up that often in GAMSAT essays unless you knew where the quote was from, or one of the comments was from, or you had an idea that was really specific to one of the prompts and you managed, you know a book or a poem or something really well, and an analysis of it is warranted within the context. It could be warranted. It could be done well if you manage to analyze it properly and kind of like pick up those psychometric points. But remember that you do have to stay within the bounds of the theme, and you want to acknowledge the theme. So if you are going to do a literary analysis, make sure it's very fitting to the theme. But yeah, that doesn't mean that you can't do it. It just means that you've got to be careful with doing it. All right, so those are the ones I've got for you. I hope that helped kind of at least widen your knowledge about the potential of essay styles that are out there. Don't limit yourself, I guess, is what I want to say. There is no one way to do anything in the GAMSAT. You can really do whatever you want. Obviously, there are certain things that work for some people and don't work for others, and you just have to be careful about which style you do choose. So long as you employ them effectively and kind of like do them justice, and write a good piece, I suppose it doesn't really matter which style you use at the end of the day. It's more about what your writing contains and what it communicates and what it says about you. So yeah, I hope that helped. Thanks so much for watching if you got up to this point, and I will see you for the next video very soon.
So girls, move it around. If you see your main dog, get the brother a pound and just